combattant de la force expéditionnaire canadienne. Monsieur Harold Stone, First World War veteran, representing all veterans of the Canadian Expeditionary Force.
Tyncott Cemetery, Passchendaele, the largest British Empire cemetery of the First World War. Almost 12,000 stones here, many of them known unto God. Behind the cross of sacrifice, a large curved wall containing the names of 38,000 British Empire soldiers who died after August 1917, who were also without any known grave. The mud of Passchendaele is evident right here. Didn't take much to bring it up again.
Just back behind you, around where those farm factories were, or the large white top building and a line running along that crest. It ended on about the 10th or 11th of November, up here about 1,000 meters. 560,000 casualties to go 3,000 yards, 200,000 of them killed. That's the cost of Passchendaele. It was the wettest summer and fall in history, in recorded history, in the previous 100 years here in Flanders. And the water table was such that the mud made it almost impossible for anyone to advance. It took hundreds of men and multiple numbers of horses to move a single artillery piece 100 yards. There were no roads. Behind you, you'll see a little road that turns to the right. When we finished our ceremony up here at Crest Farm, we're going to descend down to another Canadian battlefield called St. Julian, down the other road. That was it. 2 tracks, goat tracks, 1 wagon width apart. All the ammunition had to come up that way. All the casualties had to go back. They were laid, the engineers continually laid duck boards, but if you fell off those duck boards, the chances were that you were simply going to be sucked into the mud and drowned. I'm going to read you a passage from a soldier who fought here, just to give you an idea. It's his personal experience. I paused a moment in a shell hole. In a few seconds, I felt myself sinking, and struggle as I might, I was sucked down until I was firmly gripped around the waist and still being dragged in. The leg of a corpse was sticking out of the side, and frantically I grabbed it. It wrenched off, and casting it down, I pulled in a couple of rifles and yelled to troops in the gun pit to throw me more. Laying them flat, I wriggled over them and dropped half dead. condition. Those are the conditions in which our soldiers fought. This particular graveyard is represented, you'll notice several bunkers in here. The Germans controlled this high ground, and at great cost, the 3rd Australian Division seized this area, which was the launching off point for the Canadian Corps. When King George V came to visit this battlefield at the end of the war, they were destroying the remnants of war. The pillboxes were being removed. He stood on top of this pillbox and, looking out over the sacrifice of the battlefield, said that, no, we'll leave this one here. This is where the cross of sacrifice goes. They earn it. From the English Channel on a clear day, with binoculars, you can see this cross of sacrifice as you come over to Dunkirk. The Canadians did not want to go to Passchendaele. C'était presque la première fois que le général Curry a essayé de refuser une commande, parce qu'il a réalisé que cette bataille est un renforcement d'échoué, a reinforcement of failure. But the Canadian government directed him to proceed, and he insisted that he have time to prepare. The Canadians had not been back here since the summer of 1916, and they couldn't believe the change of this area. They could hear the guns and feel the ground shaking 40 miles away. 25 miles away, they could smell it. In these fields out here, there were probably 50 or 60,000 unburied bodies rotting or being eaten by rats. And that's the ground over which they walked, all of it under cover of artillery fire. The Canadians launched into their assault. From here, 4th Division struck off in the direction of Crest Farm, and across this little valley, the 3rd Canadian Division launched its attack. They advanced about 600 yards in the space of 3 days. They were replaced by the 1st and 2nd Canadian Division, who advanced up to the crest and seized the high ground, which you'll see from Crest Farm, the 72nd 87th Battalion taking Crest Farm itself. And then finally, in a final assault on the 10th and 11th of November, the town of Passchendaele itself was taken. The cost to the Canadians between the 26th of October and the 10th of November was 16,000 Canadian casualties, 5,000 of them killed. After that, the Canadians left Ypres and never came back. And the final irony of this, with all of this sacrifice, is in the great German March offensive of 1918, all of this ground, won by the blood of British, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand soldiers, was given back up without a shot to straighten up the line. The Battle of Passchendaele is an extraordinary example of individual and personal courage. 59 Quad Victoria ont été gagnés ici dans cette bataille entre juin et novembre. 8 de ces Quad Victoria étaient gagnés par les Canadiens. George Perks won his just over there on that high ground over by that house, leading his company to move forward and get through wire. Sergeant Mullen of the PPCLI won his in the low ground just over here, assaulting bunkers. In a moment, we're going to go and visit a Canadian soldier who won the Victoria Cross, who's buried just over here in this graveyard, and Mr. Smith will make a few words about him. He won his just up behind us a little ways. Il faut rappeler le sacrifice qu'on a fait ici. Nous avons acheté une portion d'ici de Flandre avec notre sang. We bought a little bit of this ground with our blood. It is a sacred place. It is also, for soldiers, a caution about what happens when battles are attempted without effective planning, without effective reconnaissance, and when soldiers are demanded to do things that they almost cannot do, and yet they try. The Canadian soldier here fought and died. He gave his best. He advanced 1,000 yards. We should remember that, and we will remember them.
The mud of Passchendaele. What men went through 81 years ago in October and November 1917 to capture the ridge and the town of Passchendaele should never be forgotten. The sea of mud, indescribable filth. The Canadians captured the ridge and then suffered heavily in the week following, 3,300 casualties. They cleared the town of Passchendaele, which was reduced to rubble. The 87th Battalion, which held the ridge initially, could not be reinforced for some time and suffered murderous fire and counterattacks from the Germans. Just over the crest of the next hill is another cemetery with about 4,000 graves, British Empire. Passchendaele Ridge.
All right. Second and fourth were on this side of the stream. First and third were on the other side of the stream, and they advanced along a very narrow corridor to take the village of Passchendaele. And the only way they knew that they'd taken the village and the ridge itself, the village was taken when they saw the red brick dust that the artillery fire had basically reduced the entire area to rubble and dust. And when they saw the red soil, they realized they'd taken the village.
The sun did finally come out, but the cruel weather here can make one appreciate what soldiers went through. Let's please forget. The San Julian Monument near Ypres, where in April 1915 the Germans introduced poison gas and the Canadians, in their first action, moved over to close the line.
First thing you must understand is that the first action that the Canadian Army had in the First World War. And you had essentially a very lightly trained army, one division only. There was only a single division here that had just come to France a matter of about a month before. And they've been very lightly being rotated through battalion by battalion with British brigades to get a little bit of experience of the line, but they had not been in combat and they hadn't been anywhere where things were hot. They'd taken a very few casualties. On the 19th of April, they were put into this sector, which was also presumed to be extraordinarily quiet. However, when they were set in line, we're in the area of a trench crossroads called Vancouver Corner. The troops, as you gave names to